Never did I think at my adult age that I'd be on the verge of tears watching a kids movie. But there I was, sitting on my couch fighting the flow of tears from my eyes as I watched a chihuahua tell a story about its abusive owners. Seriously, I'm not even saying this as a joke. That scene got me emotional. Anyways, I digress. This movie was great, and the ending was even better. Now let me stop rambling about my emotionality and tell you why. So to understand what makes a movie ending great, we need to first understand how the plots and the themes that were explored in the movie concluded with regards to all the characters. Let's start with our protagonist. In the beginning of the movie, we see our protagonist as this arrogant, fearless hero that thinks he's completely unstoppable, until of course his run-in with the big bad wolf, the embodiment of death himself. We see our character faced with the subject of mortality for the first time in his life, as his safety net is no longer there. And this is pretty much the foundation of the movie. How this broken hero is overcome with anxiety after losing that air of indestructibility, and how he deals with it. And the movie does great in humanizing Puss in scenes like that panic attack scene. Actually, every time the wolf came on screen, it was a humanizing moment for Puss, as the tone of the scene completely changed, and you couldn't help but feel some sort of worry for Puss. So we see the progression of Puss from arrogant hero that took life for granted to a hero that is filled with anxiety and fear of death, to the end of the movie where Puss finally stands up to death, facing him head on. And that was a great conclusion to Puss's character arc in the movie for many reasons. We see Puss's newfound appreciation of his life. We see Puss standing up to death, even though he is afraid. And let's just stop there for a second. Fear of death is such a normal feeling that every creature has. And that is why this movie is so great, because everyone can relate to Puss. Not that any of us had a wolf run after us, but in that this fear of death is so primal. So to see Puss, although having this fear, stand up to death was nothing short of inspiring. And it was a great moment. But not only that, we also see Puss's humility, as he tells the wolf, "I know I could never defeat you, but I'll never stop fighting for this life." The old Puss would have never admitted to not being as good as his opponent, because of his arrogance. Also because you shouldn't admit that to your opponent. But this time it actually helped, because death, seeing how Puss has grown, lets him off. But that wasn't the only character progression that Puss had, because you know when I said that Puss facing the wolf was the first time Puss was facing the subject of mortality? Well, I was lying. This was actually the second time, because remember Santa Coloma? What about it? For the first time ever, Puss was reminded of his mortality. And why is that? Because marriage is a reminder that we're another step closer to our final chapter. And that is why I think he was afraid. This fear of commitment stems from his fear of death. He wanted to keep the bravado going, the legend of Puss in the Boots, because it made him feel indestructible. And again, at the end of the movie, we see how his character has completely 180'd, as he lets this bravado go and returns to the paws of Kitty Softpaws. So that conclusion for Puss already is a major reason of why the ending to that movie is great. But it doesn't justify why I called it perfect. So let's see the conclusions of the other characters. And on a side note, I'm so glad I can stop saying Puss now. Goldilocks was the second most fleshed out character in the movie in my opinion. And I say that not because I was also on the verge of tears during one of her scenes. Definitely not that. But because I believe that the writers tackled an equally important theme with her, if not a more important one when you think about the target audience of the movie. And how is that? Goldilocks, like all other characters apart from Perrito, are looking to get that elusive wish. But we never know what she wants to use the wish for until the end of the movie, when she says she wants to have a family, a biological one. And here we already see the problem, because she already has a family, but she's blinded by her desire for what she has lost, that she doesn't realize the value of what she has. And the message here is clear and simple, and that is appreciating what you have. And why do I say this message is arguably the most important in this movie? Because it is simply more digestible and more relevant to the target audience of that movie. Understanding that you should appreciate what you have is such a basic yet crucial message to the younger audience that are always comparing themselves to others and taking things for granted. And that is why I think that Goldilocks' subplot was a great addition to the movie. And her conclusion of saving her brother, knowing that she was giving up her real family again, was a great conclusion to her character arc. Now on to Kitty Softpaws. She goes through her own character development, and that is going from being less trusting and cynical after being left at the altar by Puss, to regaining that ability to trust again. And although this theme of forgiveness might not seem as impactful in the movie, it was still an important message and theme to explore, even if it seemed like it was in the background. At the end of the day, that's what makes movies great. Not just the ability to make your main character interesting and multidimensional, but being able to translate that to the other characters as well, and having Kitty Softpaws not be just a one-dimensional love interest for Puss, and have a character arc of her own, definitely made for a more complete ending. Now for the villain, Jack Horner. His character was very one-dimensional, although to be fair, he did have a lot of personality. But at the end of the day, his character was just, big horrible man wants Thor to be more powerful, and that's it. And I'm sure that was very intentional, as the movie did add a few scenes that seemed to be for comedy or irony. The flashback scene when he was dancing and selling pies as a kid, or the cricket that was on his shoulder, or even when Perrito puppy-eyed him, and he didn't budge, which this scene alone just shows how cold-hearted Jack Horner is. And he says it himself, he's dead inside. The only relation that I can make for Horner is that he's the exact antithesis of Perrito, as in one scene we learn that Horner has been handed everything in life. Loving parents, food on the table, and a great inheritance, and yet he's turned out to be what is portrayed as the most horrible man on earth. While on the other hand, Perrito has every reason to be a wicked character because of his terrible backstory, and yet Perrito is the sweetest dog ever. Anyways, I don't even know if that comparison was relevant, I just thought it was interesting. At the end, Jack Horner was just a bad guy looking to be more powerful, with no real sympathetic backstory or a redemption arc, which I'm sure was a breath of fresh air to many, because we don't see those kind of villains anymore. But honestly, I prefer villains with better motivations or an interesting backstory. And if you think about it, you do too. The Joker, Thanos, Darth Vader, and I could go on. Imagine if these were just one-dimensional villains. Star Wars wouldn't have been the same, Infinity War wouldn't have been the same, and The Dark Knight or the Joker wouldn't have been the same. That being said, because of the many antagonists in this movie, I still think it was a good decision to have him be the way he is, especially since, like I said, people miss that type of villain. And of course he did get the ending he deserved. Of course I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Death himself. He was the villain of the movie, and what an entrance he had. Genuinely, every time he came on screen, I'd worry for Puss, even though I knew they can't kill Puss in a kid's movie. Now of course, his ending is directly correlated to Puss's ending, and that was that he just let him go, because he believed that he had changed. And I already told you why I thought that was a great ending for Puss. But on the other side of things, for Death, it is perfect because it is consistent with what the motivations of the character were from the jump. Death doesn't go through any character development, but he doesn't need to, because he is Death himself, and his only driving factor was the fact that Puss didn't appreciate his life, and once that changed, he stopped his pursuit. That was a great ending because it doesn't do the mistake of making Puss defeat Death in a fight, which should have been a silly ending. It maintains the ominous nature of Death, which was the right move in my opinion. And I saved the best for last. As I mentioned before, Perrito is perfect, and I'm not even gonna do any analysis or anything of that nature for his character. He was perfect at the start, and he stayed perfect throughout, and that's that. All in all, this was a great movie, and in my opinion, the ending couldn't have been better. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.